This GeoHack was launched by the University of Alaska in Juneau, Alaska's capital city, with 28 students, faculty, local and outside experts that participated. Alaska Native elders from two Southeast Alaska communities, Yakutat and Sitka, discussed numerous changes regarding historical changes in a variety of environments for marine and freshwater and terrestrial. In our pre-hack activity, which took place a week ago, 2 resulting case studies appealed to the GeoHackathon team, and these were linked in terms of food security, and both had strong relevance to EO. So these were uncertainty about salmon runs, which was universally important here, but the second one is the one we actually focused on for the GeoHackathon, which was harmful algal blooms. Harmful algal blooms, or HABs, or HABs, is a phenomena in which small components of the marine phytoplankton community expand rapidly and spread into marine food webs and expose humans to toxins through the consumption of contaminated shellfish, causing something called PSP, or paralytic shellfish poisoning. Although HABs are traditionally hard to predict, it's generally accepted that HABs are increasing in frequency and duration due to climate change and related factors such as ocean acidification. So we asked the question, is it possible to use EO technology, such as remote sensing from satellites and a network of in-situ water sampling, or water samplers, along with citizen science input, to track algal blooms before people get exposed? We also seek to increase the capacity to apply regional and local scale Earth observation to the issue and expand overall knowledge about the issue in different communities. A scenario in which this solution could be applied is in the form of an app. Basically, a mobile app would allow integration of the various elements I spoke of earlier. For instance, local users who are planning to harvest in the intertidal zone near their community prior to going out could plan using this mobile app and interrogate a variety of information about the most recent paralytic shellfish poison events, or perhaps advisories that were sent out about their community. They could check regional forecasts and environmental conditions, since those are tied to algal blooms. They could check tides and timelines of the projected toxicity of any samples that were collected in their community. Residents would also be able to report information from the ground. In other words, they would send in observations or anomalies using this app. So the approach for developing this app would be to leverage existing databases such as the Southeast Alaska Tribal Oceanographic Research Group, who have been collecting paralytic shellfish poison samples and test them for toxicity. We would further develop this database to project out toxicity windows and safe windows. That is not currently a facet of that database, but it could be done, and we could do that for different species and for different communities in the region. We would also leverage a number of existing remote sensing data sets, such as MODIS and National Weather Service forecasts and tidal information, and for visualization purposes, which I'll talk about in a sec. But we would also propose 2 new products, which would be harmful algal bloom predictions from remote sensing, as well as in concert with a network of smart buoys, information or data about local currents, and also possibly through auto sampling of water samples, detection of these paralytic shellfish poison vectors, or also known as dinoflagellates. We would also further develop the app to incorporate citizen science. In particular, we would develop the app so that people could, for instance, geotag photos or anomalies, and also report on key environmental conditions. Then we would work to develop the app so that residents or locals could visualize conditions. So this would be, for instance, looking at maps of harmful algal blooms that have been modeled across the region. They could also look at maps of current environmental conditions. They could also look at figures that project out safe windows from known PSP samples, and they could also interrogate the history for their community. In other words, they could review the history, the epidemiological history for any PSP samples that were revealed in their community or in nearby communities over the last, say, 2 years or 2 months or 2 weeks. And then finally, we would develop this app so that it would allow locals in remote communities to network globally, regionally, and also allow them to receive, for instance, PSP advisories, human health advisories through text messages, and it would allow also residents, as I mentioned earlier, they would also allow them to not only submit reports, but it would also allow residents to get more advanced information or to provide feedback on the app itself. So the app is, this is sort of a design for the app, and it has a sort of a landing page with a map, and the map shows basically different or is an example of where PSP events have taken place in the region and the magnitude of the toxicity associated with those samples. The front page would also allow you to see if there are any advisories that have been posted immediately within the region. First-time users would also get sort of a how-to through the use of a story map. And there would be 3 primary buttons, as well as a couple of other advanced buttons. The first of these main functions would be a report observation page, which would allow users to essentially report anomalies or record relevant information. Perhaps it's a shellfish itself. Perhaps it's example of a red tide, and also tag these photos, geotag them. The other page would be a timeline page, which would access the remote database. The database would be the shellfish testing that is already going on, and it would allow users to visualize toxicity levels for the various samples over a timeline. It would also project out certain safe windows based on development trajectories of these different shellfish. Residents would be allowed to also get advisories immediately for different communities, and also look into more details relating to different samples in their communities or different species. And the third page would be an other data page. So this would be a data page that would allow users to visualize environmental factors that are known to correlate with different algal blooms, or perhaps visualize the extent of harmful algal blooms from predictive models or from remote sensing data sets, as well as any data sets or data streams that were derived from our smart buoy work. So the main hurdles that we see, or sort of missing pieces of information, are local variability and drift patterns, and also we're not 100% sure if the sampling is adequate or what the extent of the sampling is for the shellfish testing. So those could be two areas that could be added to make this app better. Some potential limitations are telecommunications are fragmented and unavailable in many parts of the region. And there's some risk associated with disseminating health information. And also there's some sensitivity associated with people revealing, residents revealing where where their shellfish harvesting locations are. Areas where we see improvement for EO applications would be better algorithms for detecting algal blooms in northern latitude marine waters, some downscaling of oceanographic currents, because that's sort of done at a very large scale here in the region, and also we would need quite a bit more information on using buoys to auto-sample and detect harmful algal blooms. So that's an area we know is possible, but it hasn't been applied yet in this particular region and in these waters. So that'd be an area for future research.